Hey everyone, welcome to another episode. And today I'm excited to have Dr. Glenn Livingston with me. Dr. Glenn is a veteran psychologist and for a long time was CEO of a multi-million-dollar consulting firm, which has serviced several Fortune 500 clients in the food industry. So Glenn has sold 30 million of marketing consulting services over the course of his career. That's amazing. So you may have
It was a long career. I'm an old guy.
I know.
Don't be too impressed. Don't be too impressed. Okay. And my ex-wife did a lot of that, but that's the right number though.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you could even have seen him or his company, their previous work, theories, and research in major periodicals like the New York Times, the LA Times, the Chicago Sun-Times, the Indiana Star-Ledger, the New York Daily News, American Demographics, or any other major media outlets. So you're very well known. You may also have heard of him on ABC, WGN, or CBS Radio, or UPN TV. So Dr. Glenn got kind of disillusioned by what traditional psychology had to offer. Overweight and or food obsessed individuals like me. Dr. Livingston spent several decades researching the nature of binging and overeating via work with his own patients and self-funded research with more than 40,000 participants. So most importantly was his own personal journey out of obesity and food prison to a normal, healthy weight and a much more lighthearted relationship with food. So good afternoon and welcome again.
Good afternoon.
So Dr. Glenn is joining us from sunny Florida. That might be sunny, but it's pretty cold here at the moment.
Yeah.
We're a little bit disillusioned with it. So
we're both wearing sweaters and warm things, and we're going to write to the governor.
So I want, first of all, to allow our listeners to hear about your own story. So just tell us about you and where you've come from.
Well, the best way to characterize it is that I'm not just a doctor who decided to work with overeaters. I'm someone who actually avoided working with overeaters for many years because I had a problem myself. If you pass the Woodbury Country Deli in Woodbury, Long Island, and they were out of pizza or Pop-Tarts or those little chocolate chip cookie squares that I used to love, it's probably because I was there before you. So I had a serious problem. I did have a serious problem. It started when I was about 17. And you can't tell here, but I'm 6'4". I'm modestly muscular. And if I worked out for a couple hours a day, I could eat whatever I wanted to back then. So, boxes of donuts and boxes of muffins and whole pizzas and lattes and schmattes and whatever you want to call them. I just ate everything that wasn't nailed down. And I didn't think I had a problem. I thought I found this great part of life because I love to eat and I love to work out. And then I suppose I used to sleep a lot and poop a lot also. But that was my life as a teenager. And, que sera, sera, live and let live when you're a teenager. But there's a lot of time wasted. I could have accomplished a lot more. Nevertheless, I kept doing that through college, and I got by on that through college. But when I got married, and I was in my early 20s, I was in graduate school, so I had to commute 2 hours a day to go to classes and see patients in each direction, 2 hours in each direction.
Wow.
With traffic. I went to school in the Bronx, and I lived out on Long Island. And I came home, and God forbid my wife wanted to talk to me. And I was running a business, and I just didn't have the time to work out maybe 2 times a week, not 2 hours a day. But I found that the food had a hold of me. It's like it had a life of its own. And I just kept eating and eating and eating the same way. And I got fatter and fatter. And my triglycerides were at one point over 1,000, and the doctors were telling me I was going to die by the time I was 30. And what bothered me most, besides I'm tall, so you couldn't see the weight that badly. What bothered me the most was the food obsession. I would be I'm from a family of 17 psychotherapists, my mom and my dad and my sister
Wow.
and my
Mm.
stepmom and everybody. If something breaks in the house, we know how to ask it how it feels, but nobody knows how to fix it. Um, but I'm joking about that, but I never wanted to do anything besides be a really great psychologist. And what that means is it's not an intellectual endeavor. It's not like clients come in and they present you the jigsaw puzzle of their life, and you figure it out and you present it back to them and you say, just rotate this piece over here and here's this missing piece you were looking for. And they go, wow, doc, thank you, I'll get right on that. It just doesn't work like that.
Right.
You have to lend them your soul. You have to get them to love you and trust you enough to be willing to think new thoughts and take risks and leave their comfort zone. And in order to do that, you have to be 100% present. And I was working with suicidal adolescents. I was working with couples right after an affair was discovered. These were very high-risk situations where people were really hurting. And I couldn't be there 100%. I never lost anybody. Out of about 250 couples I saw, only 2 of them got divorced. So I did pretty good anyway. But it's because I was compensating. I would be sitting there with a suicidal adolescent and I'd be thinking, when can I get to the deli? When can I go dislodge my jaw and empty a whole pizza into it? And that really bothered me more than the weight. That was my primary motivation, more than the weight. Being from the family that I'm from, I thought that there would be a purely psychological explanation. I figured there was a hole in my heart, and if I could fill the hole in my heart, then I could stop trying to fill the hole in my stomach. That's the essence of how most of our culture tries to solve food addiction these days. They think that it's the emotions that are really causing the problem, and they're related, but they're not causative. And I'll explain why a little down the road. I was simultaneously consulting for these big food companies and big pharma companies. I feel like I was on the wrong side of the war. You ever see the Marlboro Man at the end of his life? He got lung cancer and he was very, very contrite and was making these public service announcements saying, don't smoke. I kind of feel like that. In my 30s, I was doing a lot of that. In my late 20s. And this was over a couple of decades. So I suffered for a long time. I was up to 280 pounds. Over the course of a couple of decades, I started to understand 3 powerful forces that had nothing to do with whether I was in a bad marriage or whether my mama loved me enough or that hypothetical hole in my heart. I went on a very soulful journey. I went to OA, I went to Overeaters Anonymous, I went to psychiatrists and psychologists, and I saw the best eating disorders people around because my family knew them in New York City, right? But in the end, I don't regret the journey because it was really soulful, but none of that really saved me. What saved me was understanding, 1, the structure of the brain that responds to the food addiction seems to be much more primitive. It's in the reptilian brain, like the seat of our feast and famine response that says, just hand over the chocolate and nobody gets hurt. The reptilian brain doesn't know love. So here I am spending 30 years trying to solve a problem by loving myself more, but the reptilian brain knows nothing about love. The reptilian brain knows, do I eat it, do I mate with it, or do I kill it? Eat, mate, or kill. It's like a bad college drinking game. And what was happening was these big food companies were engineering these hyper palatable concentrations of starch and sugar and fat and oil and excitotoxins, and they're trying to hit the bliss point in the reptilian brain without giving us enough nutrition to feel satisfied. That's what was going on. That's a very powerful force that has nothing to do with how my mama felt about me. Then you look at the advertising industry, and most people think that advertising doesn't affect them, but what if I told you advertising affects you more when you think it doesn't affect you? Because your sales resistance is down. So they've got us right where they want us. And they're masters at making us feel like we can't survive without these things. I remember a good friend of mine was the vice president of a major food bar manufacturer. And he explained to me as he was leaving the company, hanging his head in shame, kind of saying, the most profitable thing we did was to take the vitamins out of the bar. The vitamins were making it taste bad and they were expensive. So we took the vitamins out of the bar and we put the money into making the package look healthy instead. So they had this vibrant diversity of colors and, it looked like a big shiny salad. And our brains are wired to respond to a diversity of shiny colors because that's how you get a diversity of nutrients. They always tell you to eat the rainbow. There's purple cabbage and blueberries and shiny green leaf lettuce and tomatoes, bright red tomatoes and yellow carrots. And if you eat the rainbow, you're getting a variety of nutrients. So the company was targeting that evolutionary response, but the nutrients weren't there. It was a parasitic move. And I don't mean to just single out that food bar manufacturer, because this goes on all across the industry. There are all types of ways that they work to give us plausible deniability. Ooh, look, these potato chips are fried in avocado oil.
Right.
And avocados are good for you, right? It doesn't matter that all the studies on heated oils say that they're carcinogenic. It doesn't matter that the acrylamides that are created when you make potato chips are also carcinogenic. And I would fight for people's ability to have potato chips if they want to. I'm not arguing that you can't have things that are bad for you. I'm arguing that you shouldn't get fooled into thinking they're good for you. That's when you get into a lot of trouble. So I have those things. I have this kind of cadre of insights. And then there was a part of that 40,000 person study we did led me to some insights about what people who struggle with chocolate as their first binge food have. And I'm a chocolate struggler, and it turns out they tend to be, we tend to be a little lonely or depressed. We tend to be a little lonely or depressed or brokenhearted or a little prone for that. And I asked my mom, because she's a psychotherapist and she raised me, and I said, I have this really big study with 40,000 people that says people that struggle with chocolate tend to be lonely or depressed. How did this start? Like, how did I learn to go to food when I was lonely or depressed? And my mom gets this horrible look on her face. She goes, I'm so sorry, honey. And I said, Mom, it's okay. It was 40 years ago. I love you to death. It's okay. All is forgiven. I just want to figure this out. And she says, I'm so sorry. But when you were 1 year old, in 1965, and your dad was a captain in the Army, they were talking about sending him to Vietnam, and I was terrified. We were trying to get pregnant with your sister, and I thought, I'm going to be a mother of 2 little kids, and I'm going to be an Army widow, and I was just terrified. I didn't want to lose him. At the same time, my dad, your grandfather, just got out of prison, and I had no idea that he was guilty, and I'd always idolized him, and my whole world fell apart. And so when you would come running to me for food or for love or just to play, I didn't have the wherewithal to do that. I was sitting and staring at the wall most of the time. So what I did is I kept a refrigerator on the floor with a big bottle of chocolate Bosco syrup. Do you remember chocolate Bosco syrup, Lynn?
No, I don't.
Okay, I'm probably older than you then.
No, you're not. But I grew up in England, so.
Oh, that's why.
Yeah.
Okay. She would keep a bottle of chocolate Bosco syrup on the floor, and she would say, Glenn, go get your Bosco, if I came running to her. And I'd go crawling over to the refrigerator, and I'd open it up, and I'd open the bottle, and I'd suck on it and go into a chocolate sugar coma, and she could resume staring at the wall. Now, if this were a movie, Mom and I would have had a movie moment. We'd have a big hug and a big cry, and we'd forgive each other, and then I'd never struggle with chocolate again, right?
Right.
What actually happened was the problem got worse. We did have a big hug and a kind of metaphorical cry, and we forgave each other. It was a good conversation to have. I learned a lot about her, and she learned a lot about me. And I felt more forgiving of myself. I didn't hate myself as much after that. So it was a good conversation to have. But the chocolate problem got worse because there was this little voice in my head. I'm not schizophrenic, this is metaphorical.
I know what you mean, yeah.
Yeah. There's this little voice in my head and would say, you know what, Glenn, you're right. Our mama didn't love us enough. And she left a great big chocolate-sized hole in her heart. And until you can find love or get out of this marriage and fix this problem in your life, you're going to have to go right on binging on chocolate. Let's go get more right now. Yippee. Putting all these things together, along with some of the evidence that was emerging about what actually works in food addiction, I said to myself, I have to take a different approach. I can't nurture my inner wounded child to get better. It's just not working. I can't love myself thin. I need to love myself, but I can't love myself thin. I need to be more like the alpha wolf of my own body. And I need to understand that this reptilian brain inside of me is a thing, just like my bladder is a thing that might be saying, Glenn, you really need to pee right now, but you're in the middle of a conversation with Lynn. And so I would say, I'm sorry, we're going to wait until afterwards. I'll take care of you. You know, there's an authentic need there, but I'm the boss. I'm the alpha dog. You're going to have to wait. There are a lot of other reproductive functions. You don't go run and kiss attractive men or women in the street, right? You have to approach in a very civilized, established manner. Otherwise, you get in a whole lot of trouble. So I said, this should be possible to do this. All I need to do is I need a way to be really clear when the reptilian brain was activated so it couldn't fool me. Because I would find a lot of the time it would say, Glenn, you can have a chocolate bar now because you worked out really hard and you're not going to gain any weight. It's okay. It would always be fooling me. So I needed a way to recognize when it was the reptilian brain and not me talking. And then I needed some type of a really primitive mantra or a primitive way to wake up and remember who I was and why I made these rules in the first place that I wanted to stick to. So this is a little embarrassing as a sophisticated psychologist, but the way that I got better was I decided that I had an inner pig. I wish I chose another word for it because pigs are really sweet animals. And this is before I was, sometimes I'm involved with animal rescue and things like that. But anyway, it's just a metaphor. It's just a concept. It's not an actual animal. I said, I've got a pig inside me. That's my inner pig. I'm going to make really clear rules. So I will say, I will never eat chocolate on a weekday again. I'll only ever eat chocolate on a Saturday or Sunday because my binges always started with chocolate. And that way, if I was in a Starbucks and there was a big hairy chocolate bar on the counter that was calling my name saying, Glenn, you worked out really hard, even though it's a Wednesday, you're not going to gain any weight. It doesn't make any difference. You can just start again tomorrow. It's just as easy. I would say, wait a minute, that's not me. That's my inner pig. And it's squealing for slop. Chocolate is pig slop on a Wednesday. I don't eat pig slop. I don't let farm animals tell me what to do. This was not something I was working on publishing. This was not something I thought I would ever be famous for. I didn't have a grand plan to be the pig guy going around telling a million people that they have inner pigs inside of them. This was just a way that I wanted to recover myself. And it was not a miracle in that I wasn't all better right away. What was a miracle was it cleared away a lot of confusion. I no longer felt like there was this mysterious force inside of me. I no longer felt like I was powerless. I said, oh, there's this activation of a biological drive inside of me. I can separate from that drive. Just like I separate from the drive to urinate or, to reproduce, I can separate from that drive and take control over how and when it's expressed. Sometimes I would make the right choice and sometimes I wouldn't. But over time, I realized that I was the one making the rules. And so I experimented with all kinds of different rules, and I figured out you have to set a low bar at first and then make it higher. And I kept a journal for 8 years about why my pig was wrong. So for example, when it said, it's just as easy to start tomorrow, you're not going to gain any weight now because you worked out hard enough. Even though you said you're never going to eat chocolate on a weekday, go ahead, it's Wednesday, what the hell? And besides, chocolate grows on a cocoa plant and that means it's a vegetable, so go ahead and enjoy it. When it would say that kind of thing, I would take each little piece of it and I would logically disempower it in my journal. So for example, the idea that it's just as easy to start tomorrow is incorrect from a neurological perspective. From a neurological perspective, what fires together wires together. If you have an urge and you reinforce that urge with the substance, then that urge will be stronger tomorrow. You're actually digging a deeper hole for yourself. The addiction will be stronger tomorrow. We're always either reinforcing or extinguishing our addictions. So if you're in a hole, stop digging. So I would actually write these things out until I figured out how to disempower those crazy justifications, those crazy voices of justification. And eventually, after about 8 years, it took about 2 years to get better, but after about 8 years, I'd kind of come up with a whole system. And I recognized that what I'd really done was I'd severed the link between emotional upset and binging and overeating. It used to be that I'd be emotionally upset and then I would go to food. I didn't solve the emotional problems. I wound up getting divorced and I still don't really have love in my life like that. And and it's kind of a hard thing to find.
Mm.
But I decided that I didn't have to wait until that was fixed before I could stop overeating. It's kind of like if you think about the emotion as a fire, and um, you can have a roaring fire in a well-contained fireplace in the living room, and that's an asset, not a liability. It becomes the center of hearth and home. If there are holes in the fireplace and one ash gets out, then it burns down the house. And what I figured out was that it was easier to construct a better fireplace and let the fire roar. And coincidentally, once the fire felt safer to look at, then there were a lot of improvements that were made. But it was easier to stop the ashes from getting out than to think the whole task was to fix the fire. Let the fire burn, fix the fireplace, and over time I was able to recover. I mean, look at me now, I recovered fairly nicely. And when I was getting divorced in 2015, I was a minor part of a publishing company through my various business activities. And the CEO said to me, Glenn, we need to publish a book so that we can prove that we know what we're doing and attract better authors. And I said, well, I'm getting divorced. I'm tearing this other stuff down because we're all intertwined with it. Maybe I should turn this journal that I wrote into a book. And he said, I love it. I was really nervous about doing it because it's just me versus my pig. And so I spent a few months and I edited the whole thing into a book, and I sent it to him. And he calls me back 2 weeks later and he says, Glenn, donuts are pig slop. I don't eat pig slop. I don't let farm animals tell me what to do. And he proceeds to lose almost 100 pounds over the next year and a half or so. And so we published it, and I knew I could turn it into a little business. I had no idea how popular it was going to be. I mean, we've got 1 million readers and almost 9,000 reviews. And I guess other people must feel like they have a pig inside of them too, which you can call a food monster or a food demon or anything you want to, as long as it's not a cute little pet that you want to nurture. So now I walk around going, I don't eat pig slop. I don't let farm animals tell me what to do, and you shouldn't either. And I help people to come up with their own rules, and that's become my life. So, but it works. It works where nothing else does in many situations. Yeah, we have data to prove that now.
Yeah, and I totally get that, because I'm totally the type of person that binge eats. My whole thing is chocolate too, but it's specific. It has to be Cadbury's milk chocolate. I only do the English stuff.
Yeah.
And I found myself, after my mum passed away, actually switching that to a different kind of candy that she and I had eaten together when I used to go over and visit her. And yeah, if we don't kind of begin to recognize that we have a problem, then how do we ever begin to solve the problem? Because some people just don't even see it as a problem. That's just the way they are. But it is a problem.
Well, it's a problem if you say it's a problem. I mean, I wouldn't want to designate it as a problem for you unless you're... It
is a problem for me. And it's something that I have to, work on. I have worked on as a health coach, and so my realization was that one way I could help myself was I understand that when you're addicted to sugar or to chocolate, it's the same part of the brain, is it not, that causes you to be addicted to cocaine?
Yes, more or less, I believe, yes.
So that kind of helped me, because I wouldn't want to put cocaine into my body. So why do I want to put this chocolate in? Because just like you, it was harming my body. My triglycerides were like 550. My cholesterol overall was just awful. So it does harm us.
Then what I tell people in terms of the reframe that you just helped yourself with was that we're not actually just eating for comfort. It's true that when you overload the digestive system, the nervous system has difficulty conducting the emotions. And thank you to Doug Graham for pointing that out to me. So it is true that there's a kind of anesthetic effect of overeating. But the things that we're overeating are things we didn't have on the savannah, that we're not evolutionarily prepared to digest. So there was no chocolate bar tree on the savannah. There was no oil tree. There was no pasta tree. There was no pizza tree. we didn't have these things. These are concentrations of pleasure that our brain just never expected to see. They're supersized concentrations of pleasure. And what happens when you repeatedly present a supersized concentration of pleasure to the brain and your, your taste pleasure system, it's called downregulation. It's like if you sleep underneath the subway, after a few weeks, you don't really hear the subway because it's too much stimulation. So your nervous system adjusts downwards. The same thing happens with your taste pleasure system. So if you're having a chocolate bar every day, you're actually down regulating your ability to respond to the natural sugars in fruits and vegetables, and to get pleasure out of the things we're supposed to get pleasure from. That's where everybody knows if you want to lose weight, you have to eat more fruits and vegetables. But a lot of people say it's hopeless for them because they hate fruits and vegetables, because their systems have just down-regulated. The good news is that it goes in reverse also. So if you get the stuff out of your system, 6 to 8 weeks later, your taste buds can double in sensitivity. Back to what you were saying, what we're really doing when we're ingesting these substances is getting high with food. We're getting high with food. I mean, I would fight for your right to do that if you want to. I think chocolate can be a lovely thing for a lot of people. I eventually came to the point where I just couldn't have any at all. I tried 6 ways to Sunday, all these different rules. I just decided I'm never having chocolate again. And I've not looked back. I feel so much better since I do that. I don't even have to think about it anymore. I don't have cravings. It's been years and years. And I just feel normal again. Like why did I ever want that in my life? And if you asked me if that were going to be possible 10 years ago, when I couldn't walk by the checkout counter in Shaw's in New Hampshire without, buying a few bars, I would say there's no way. It was not possible. But it's helpful to think that what you're doing is getting high with food. Or you can think about going to the dentist, right? You go to the dentist has never yet said to me, we're out of Novocaine. I think I'm going to inject you with a little chocolate instead. Right? If I were really just numbing out, if it really was really just numbing or comforting my emotions, then maybe that would work. But there's something else going on, right? We're getting high with food. And most people don't want to be a drug addict. Most people want to think of themselves as a more healthy, civilized, functioning person in our society.
So how do you actually create your own food plan? So if you're in this situation, how do you create a food plan that works?
Very important that you start slowly. One of the pig's biggest strategies is to keep you on the feast and famine roller coaster. So most overeaters are also very good dieters. And it's part of the justification for overeating. This is okay because next week I'm just doing a green juice cleanse, right? So I'm only going to have 500 calories a day and this will come right off me. Well, it does, but what you don't realize is that if we live in an environment where the brain thinks that food and nutrition are scarce, calories and nutrition are scarce, then once it is available, it's going to say, hoard as much as you can. This is why people get a case of the F-its. They make all these rules and then they're standing in front of that chocolate bar at Starbucks and all the rules go out the window. Your body's response to over-restriction is binging. So it's very important that you start with the bar low and that you are having enough calories and nutrition to avoid that feast and famine response. I tell people you want to flood your body with nutrition at a slight caloric deficit. I'm not a medical doctor or a nutritionist, so I'm speaking as a layperson who has done an awful lot of research and talking to people. But nevertheless, that's what I see. Flood your body with nutrition at a slight caloric deficit. That equates to losing about 1 pound a week, maybe 2 at the absolute most if you have a lot to lose. So you want to pick a rule that's going to get you started in that direction. So I ask people to come up with one simple rule. What's one simple rule that will give you the biggest bang for the buck? Meaning that it's not too onerous. It doesn't feel like you're torturing yourself or that you're on a quote unquote diet, but it's going to make a difference. So I remember this truck driver who ate at fast food restaurants all day long. And he said, I can't stop doing that. But he said, what I would do is I'll never go back for seconds. And he proceeded to lose 150 pounds, not just with that one rule, but that one rule made a dent and it made a difference. And then he started exercising a little bit and, or some people will make rules that don't involve giving anything up at all or regulating any food in any particular amount. They'll make rules that support mindfulness. Like I always put my fork down between bites, or I'll never eat in front of a screen again. Or you can make rules that say what you will always do as opposed to what you'll never do. So I always start my day with 2 glasses of pure spring water, or I always meditate before I turn on the computer. Something that puts you in the right frame of mind, and just it gets you over the edge from being in a self-destructive mode to being in a constructive mode, signaling to yourself that you can and will take care of yourself, and that you do have power and you can win. People who have been overeating for a long time, they tend to feel hopeless and depressed about it. I remember my mom had a big chocolate problem, particularly on Halloween. And the last Halloween of her life, she had me come over. She says, Glenn, she had cancer, and it was kind of clear she wasn't going to make another year, which is sad. But she said, I just want to have one Halloween where I don't binge on chocolate. I don't want to eat all the chocolates that are left over after we give them to the kids. Can you help me to do that? And so I coached her through it, and she was able to resist. And I actually have a little video of her talking about it. So, something simple. Like another example might be, let's see, I'll never go to bed without writing down a hypothetical food plan for the next day. I use the word hypothetical because it recognizes that things could change. But if you go through the act of trying to plan out the next day, it forces you to think through the difficult times in your day. Where are you going to get the food? When are you going to have the time to eat it? How are you going to take care of yourself? And most people wind up in overeating situations because they let their blood sugar get out of balance. They're unable to eat in the morning. They didn't have time to go get a salad or something like that. And they put everybody else first, all these other meetings and people. And I work with a lot of doctors and health coaches who sometimes put their clients first and aren't taking enough time for themselves to do what they need to do. So we all need those reminders. I need those reminders too. So some simple rules. Simple rules. One simple rule. You might not lose weight to start with this rule. That's okay. The goal of the rule is to move you from being self-destructive to being constructive. It's to move you from feeling powerless to feeling powerful. It's to show you that you're the boss of your pig. Your pig is not the boss of you. One simple rule. That's the best way to get started.
That's really helpful, because as a health coach, my whole thing is to get to a healthy lifestyle. People think you've got to do a dramatic change, but if you do, that doesn't work for most people. It's one step at a time.
Because you have to go to kindergarten before you can go to college.
Right.
Yeah. I have a bunch of free stuff when you're ready to.
Yes, I was just looking at that and thinking I was going to ask you if you would tell people where they can get your free resources, because they're so helpful. So many of us struggle in this way.
So you can get these all at neverbingeagain.com. Click on the big red button and sign up for the reader bonuses. Here's what we have for you. First of all, there's a free copy of the book in Kindle, Nook, or PDF format. So the book is free in electronic format. There are paid versions in paperback and Audible if you want that. But more importantly, we put together a set of food plan starter templates. So we call them starter templates because we don't want to take responsibility for what you're eating. But we put a lot of time into thinking about what set of rules might work for particular dietary philosophies. So regardless of whether you're whole foods plant-based like I am, or you're trying to do ketogenic, or you're a point counter or a calorie counter or macrobiotic, whatever you're doing, low carb, high carb, we put together a set of sample rules that you might consider working towards. And you could pick one simple rule from those groups to get started. And that's all free. Sorry about the plane in the background. And I like to work with the windows open because the fresh air really inspires me. Even though it's cold, Lynn.
It is cold. It is.
The third thing we have for you is, I know this sounds really weird in theory. I mean, you can probably tell I'm a nice guy, I'm a compassionate guy, but most people think, why does Lynn have this doctor with a pig inside of him on her show? What's going on? It sounds like it's really harsh, but it's not harsh. People are frightened that they're going to wind up calling themselves a pig and it's going to degrade their self-esteem. But the opposite actually happens. It's a very compassionate process. If you listen to a bunch of our recorded coaching sessions, you'll see that people go from feeling hopeless and powerless and despairing about food to feeling extraordinarily inspired and hopeful and enthusiastic in just one session. So I recorded a bunch of sessions that you can listen to for free when you
Awesome.
when you sign up. It's neverbingeagain.com. Click on the big red button.
Yeah, I will be sure to have all of those in the show notes for people, along with anything else that you sent me to connect with you. I so appreciate this because I think it's very timely, because I think more than ever with the way 2020 was, people have been working from home and their whole normalcy has changed. So it's been difficult for people to stay sometimes in that healthy lifestyle pattern. So I appreciate this.
Well, plus the news is just constant fear, which
Yes.
activates the reptilian brain. It's easier to slip into the emergency survival responses, and it's harder to rest and digest and be strategic about what you're eating when every other minute on the news they're telling you that X many million people have just died of COVID. It's kind of terrifying, and people have to find their center. I've found that when people are willing to adopt this, it becomes like a meditation. So I know that sticking to my food plan has helped me feel centered during COVID. And I not only have my own fears to deal with, but I've got, we have hundreds of active clients at any given time, and I'm really immersed with everybody's fears. So I found that sticking to these, even one simple rule, it slows you down. It reminds you that you can use the human part of your brain. You don't have to be so animalistic in response to what's going on. And the food industry is taking advantage of this time, of course. So
of course. Yeah. So thank you so much. I appreciate you being on with me today and giving our listeners such great information.
Thank you, dear. This was lovely.
Thanks.
Neverbingeagain.com. Click the big red button.
Yes, most certainly. And I will be thinking about my word, because I don't want an inner pig, but I'll be thinking about something for me. So
what are you going to call it?
I have to think about that. Not an inner pig. I kind of like the example you gave of some kind of demon or some kind of monster, because it's kind of like a cookie monster in my mind.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So thanks again.
Well, thanks for having me on.
And let's hope it warms up for us here in Florida very quickly.
I hope so. And if you send me the link when it's up, I'll get you some traffic too. Okay.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Okay. Be well, everybody.
Bye.